So we have up on the stage this amazing installation at this point, but I'm very excited to welcome to Thrive a whole team of people from USC who have been brought together by Dr. Florin Oprescu and Bridie Keane. So joining them up here will be Sharon Hill and James Hill, who also represent the Sunshine Coast Spinners wheelchair basketball organisation. And they're going to present a discussion that's titled Reverse Inclusion, an all-inclusive and all-welcome experience. Reverse inclusion activities aim to increase participation of able-bodied people in wheelchair basketball as a form of health promotion and social inclusion on the Sunshine Coast and beyond. Reverse inclusion activities can increase access to sport, physical activity and new friends for people of all abilities. So welcome team, I invite you up to the stage.
Oh, there should be a switch on that one. Yep.
Yeah, there is a switch.
Your start so far?
Yes, so basically, welcome and thank you so much for being here today. With your permission, I'll use a timer because I like to talk, so I need to know when to stop. But basically what we have here, thank you very much, John, for the introduction. It is an art installation. We get very artsy sometimes. And there is a message behind it whereby the person in the middle, which you can imagine being a person of any ability, is the one that brings us all together around. So actually the inclusion happens from the center, people being pulled in. So we're going to go through about 9 slides, if that's okay with you. First, what's health promotion? Health promotion is a science and an art. And thank you, John, for the invitation. It is a science and an art because you have to think in creative ways on how can you create environments, right? Environments that are supportive and healthy and allow people to grow, develop, live, work, and play in a healthy way. And basically, we got here Bridie. Bridie, who's led the Australian wheelchair basketball team to silver in London 2012. Congratulations, Bridie. We got James, and James is the coach, the player, the all-rounder, idea generator, and the one with the tallest chair of us all. Congratulations. And then we have Sharon, who's the doer behind the scenes. So we'll start with James and Sharon, if that's okay, to tell us a little bit about the benefits and the history behind this. Oh, yes.
I'm not a public speaker, sorry. Okay, so up here we have what is ultimately what reverse inclusion is. We've got a couple of our members who obviously have disability in wheelchairs and have not many options for playing sport. And then we have another 2 members with no disabilities who we encourage to come along and join our club and play with them. This event here was in February, and our team was going to forfeit this event because we didn't have enough members to play. So we invited these other 2 members along, and they easily said yes, came along, we played. So these 2 members with disability got to play. We came second. James did play with them as well. But we came second and they had that opportunity. Without our able-bodied players, we wouldn't have been able to put together a team. So reverse inclusion is about bringing people with out disability into a sport traditionally played for people with disability, and it not only gave these two members an opportunity to participate, but it gives them members of their own age to socialise with and have friendships and make connections in the community, let alone all the benefits it gives the able-bodied students in what they learn about accepting people with disabilities. They'll carry those lessons through their whole life. I'll let James talk about it a little bit more because he was the coach that day for that team.
I'm not necessarily going to talk about that day necessarily, but the two participants on the left, Ben and Grace, we first met them when we started doing our workshops with the schools. So it was from Maloney and BOR High, so those the middle years there. We had the two schools come in, we did an inter-school competition. Basically that was to give the students with disability from those schools an opportunity to play with their friends in a sport that they can actually interact in. As for those schools, it was rather hard for them to be inclusive for the para-athletes. And for the two students, three students who were in a wheelchair for those schools, from one of the students we did get feedback. They had a written feedback in a folder for us, and his comment were that he said, thanks for teaching us about wheelchair basketball. It really showed that being in a wheelchair doesn't suck and there are things to do. So when you get that kind of feedback, it really is empowering. It makes you feel like you're doing good for the kids themselves, so he can now go forward and he's got something to look forward to and not necessarily sit at home and say, oh, I'm in a wheelchair, I can't do much, because there are the opportunities that these students have had. So Grace and Ben, you can see there in the tournament playing away with the para-athletes, and it gives them the opportunity to make friends. Also at the January tournament that the Suncoast Spinners hold at Caloundra Stadium, there's maybe an image, I'm not too sure, is it in here, of Ben and Grace with Jay Shaw? No, somewhere. So there's a photo that Mum captured of two able-bodied athletes.
There was three teenagers being teenagers. I had to tell them off a few times because they were being naughty. But what was nice about it was that our member with disability had that opportunity to interact in a normal teenage manner, which I've known him for 6 years now, and I hadn't seen that in him. He hadn't had that opportunity until Ben and Grace came along and joined our club. So it's quite nice when, and I've seen this before because I've got, my other son has a friend who's blind, and when they were teenagers growing up, they were often my son was doing naughty teenage things, like, they were going into the girls' toilets at the public places, and my son would say to him, what are you doing, are you blind or something, and pulling him out. And there was heaps of laugh and fun, and I would go to this other boy's mother and say, I'm so sorry, like, what they got up to onto the weekend, and she would say to me, no, it's okay, we would like him to go out and do normal, naughty things that teenage boys do, and he's getting that opportunity now. And it's the same with these kids. They get to interact and do normal things, where without the able-bodied participants, they wouldn't get that.
Oh, my turn. Oh, okay, I'll I guess tell the perspective of reverse inclusion from growing up with a physical disability. So the reason that this program resonates with me so much is that I've had the opportunity to play sport and become really empowered through sport. And for me, sport was probably more than what a lot of athletes get from sport in the ability to compete at a high performance level. It's exciting, but for me it was actually really empowering because I spent a lot of my childhood in a hospital ward. And then when I was able to get out of that hospital ward and finally be active, it was a way for me to be able to express myself on the court. And I wanted to be able to make the wheelchairs you see before you today do absolutely incredible things. But I guess the one thing that was missing was that my siblings didn't play wheelchair basketball with me. So I've never actually played sport with my siblings. So what Sharon and James have spoken about, the thing that I think I see as one of the biggest strengths of the Reverse Inclusion Project is that what it does is it enables siblings and friends to play together. And that, I think, in terms of what that's going to do for social inclusion, but also just building memories and being able to experience that activity together is what I think is really important about this program.
Thank you very much. So the slides are out of sync also as part of the installation, just so you know. They move on to keep us on track, so thank you very much for that. And the reality of these siblings playing is really important because you don't realize it's just like being a child again and getting on a box with wheels on it and then moving around and playing around. So it actually allows even the adults to play quite a bit, which is a nice thing. So now the team members, it's my turn to say this is based on a team effort. So it's not a one-person game. It's actually a big team game. And we got a big team, and basically we have the doers, the people who actually do the work, and then we have the coach, which is very important for this one, and we'll talk a little bit more about the coaches because they are key to making the things work. We need the people behind the scenes like Sharon, and Brooke and James are the coaches here. Then you have the champions like Bridie. And then you have some thinkers and people who talk a lot, like myself. And then basically that's what we have as a team. And we have these 6 C's that can be put behind all this, which is creativity. You have to think of things in creative ways and try to come up with solutions that have not been thought before. Collaboration. It is about the community and making it a healthier place for everybody, able-bodied or not. It's about challenging yourself to do things in different ways. It's about caring as much as you can for different things, including the wheelchairs, which are an important part of equipment. And finally, it's about consumers, which were mentioned before. And I can say that consumers are of 3 types, ABs, MBs, and OBs. So the ABs are the able-bodied, which you can see here. And the other ones are what I call MBs, which is multiple ability bodied, because they can do a lot more things than we can. So James, even with his hand in a cast, can play basketball at the same time as coaching and doing other things. So multiple able-bodied people. And OBs are the office bounds, myself again. So it's basically everybody benefits.
So the next thing we'll describe is how the program actually came to be. So we, the team that Florin has described, and I think this is another great thing about the program, is that it was based from a community organisation, being the Suncoast Spinners Wheelchair Basketball Club. So the Wheelchair Basketball Club has always been open for able-bodied people to participate as a way to grow numbers. But the Reverse Inclusion Project, which has been an initiative funded through the National Disability Insurance Agency, has specifically focused on including, getting out there and including as more people as possible into the game of wheelchair basketball. So one thing that we had as a goal at the end point was to be able to create some change, like Florin has talked about, in a health promotion setting. And so our objectives have been to create a university competition for wheelchair basketball, so that when people with disabilities go to university, there is a social competition for sport, just like everybody else has access to. So this idea I would love to claim as my own, but it actually was something that James came up with and reported back to Florin and I. Then Florin and I met with Sharon, and then things just started moving really quickly, and we're now into our 4th week of a university social comp, which I'll let James explain.
Yeah, so basically it just came back from, I was in a SEEDS program with Bridie. She was trying to get a high performance program at university for those para-athletes that we had there at the time, and then it came to sort of the review time, and then I sort of had my 2 cents worth in there, and I said, look, we just need to get more ABs. That's my opinion. I just sort of look at the American sort of collegiate sort of side of it and think, why don't we get a fan base like that? Or, as Bridie mentioned a few times, the Canadian side, they have a full AB team, and that was kind of the sort of thought train as to why don't we get some ABs going. And so yeah, then the next thing sort of train moved along and moved on to having a university sort of social game. And so within that, it's kind of just you basically just sort of teach them a bit about wheelchair basketball, how to pick up a ball, how to dribble, the rules of the game. It's not much different to AB. There are only 3 differences in the rules. You just convert everything over to a wheelchair from there. But other than that, it's just giving them an experience. I mean, I've never had anyone come back and say, gee, that was not fun. Everyone ends up with a smile on their face, or they're wanting to keep going. We do have a staff team that Bridie's involved in at USC, and a few of them try and hang back as long as possible to not go back to work. But I mean, that's pretty much it, really. For the activity side of things, just teach them that there is another avenue that they can play, can play wheelchair basketball, and it is all inclusive at the social level. So.
I was going to say that James is actually an AB, even though he's got his arm in plaster. And he started playing wheelchair basketball when he was 14 through a school program, the Duke of Edinburgh. He did it as an activity, and then he stayed on and did his community service through the Wheelchair Basketball Club. And that's when I got involved with the sports club, like most mothers do. You tend to get pulled in and involved, and now it's 6 years later, and now James is running wheelchair basketball programs at the university, which we are stepping out of the bounds of traditionally in Australia, able-bodied wheelchair basketball teams aren't the norm. It's not unusual for able-bodies to play wheelchair basketball, but to do it to the extent that we're doing at USC is a little unusual and a little new, and it's not always easily accepted by people to have able-bodied people playing wheelchair basketball, but once people do it, they actually quite enjoy it.
And I guess to go back to why it was my dream to have a university competition was because it probably goes back to what it was like growing up without inclusive sport. So I have a lot of memories from high school of sitting on the sidelines. And for me, sport was what I wanted to do. And my mum tried to get me involved in every other activity there was growing up because she thought, wouldn't it be great if I loved playing the piano? And I was so bad at it, and I dreaded my piano lessons. I just wanted to play sport. And so going back to my school days and thinking, yes, okay, it's PE time, or physical education time, and I'm going to sit on the sidelines watching people do what I want to be able to do, sometimes complaining. When people used to complain about it, that was the worst. So for me, it was about the idea that people with disabilities should have equal opportunities to do what they love, whatever that may be. And so going into high school and university, where there was no university sport for me to play when I first started my first degree of a couple of different avenues at Monash many, many years ago. And so I guess what I'm really looking forward to is the day that it just becomes such an embedded part of university culture or high school culture that we have inclusive programs, and that we continue to find people like Sharon and Florin and all the great people that this program's brought together to keep driving programs like that forward, because there have been a lot of barriers along the way, but there's also been one step forward for another program that's completely inclusive for people to just be able to do what they love to do. So I think our key messages are what Florin talked about being creative in our thinking of how can we achieve what we want. For me, I actually wanted to start a wheelchair basketball program, as James talked about, for para-athletes, and we just couldn't get the numbers. So this was a way to just sort of redirect the goals and dreams to say, okay, well, how do we build the sport through other means? And so the inclusion of able-bodied players not only improves our sport, it's brought about all these social benefits as well, to having a fully inclusive environment where instead of me having to try and play an able-bodied sport, I'm able to bring my siblings into my sport and show them that I'm what I'm good at. And the best thing is this new competition, I get to be the star player. That's a side point. But I think that's one of our key messages, is just to create, to continue to think creatively. And the other one is to an open invitation to invite you all to come and play wheelchair basketball. So I'll leave Sharon to give the details of, or James to give the details of where to find us.
I think it's all up there, isn't it? Suncoast Spinners Wheelchair Basketball down at the USC Stadium, 6:30, 8:30, Wednesday nights. If you're a USC student or staff, there is Thursdays at 11:30 to 1:30. Other than that, yeah, I suppose, as Bridie said, it's just about getting people to see everyone for their ability rather than their disability. So that's about it.
So basically what we have presented to you in the last 18 minutes and 5 seconds is an example of health promotion and how it is done as a science and an art, and then you can combine a bit of sport in it, and that makes it a bit sass and wonderful and fantastic. And it's all levels of abilities, because even on this picture you have everything from little kids all the way to international level players, which is absolutely fantastic because it makes the game even more interesting, and it makes for a healthy competition. These people are amazing when they get on the court.
I just want to mention one thing in closing, which I should have mentioned at the start, but wheelchair basketball, another thing that I think is really amazing about the game is the way that we have a classification system in wheelchair basketball. So if you do have a physical disability, you're classified according to that disability, so that because when we're in wheelchairs, I'm an amputee, so I can still rotate and have full muscle use. So my classification is a 4.0, and the highest is a 4.5 player, and that might be someone who's had multiple knee reconstructions and can no longer run. Now the classification system ranges from 1.0 to 4.5, and you must have 5 players on court that equal 14 points.
Less than 14.
Yeah, less than up to 14 points. So what that means is that we create an environment where we're not competing against people that have, or we're all competing together, but when you're trying for a spot on the Australian team or for court time, my competition was always people with a really similar physical disability to myself. So that's how wheelchair basketball for people with disabilities creates more of an equal playing field where you're not disadvantaged by your disability, but it's actually just all about your ability.
And the team has to have both.
Yeah, so the team must have a combination of people with all different types of physical disabilities.
So you have to be really creative when you put a team together for competition purposes.
You have to be an athletician.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. You're invited all on Wednesday night, 6:30 at the USC Stadium to try to play, and James will be there and Bridie to coach you, and Sharon will be behind the lines making everything work smoothly, including the chairs. And I think now it's time for Q&As. Thank you very much.